Hey everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for taking the time to purchase and support. I really appreciate you guys really paying attention to these last three videos. I've been getting a lot of really good emails and questions about the information in these last three videos. Now you can tell that these videos go together as far as the information. And it's a lot of information to break down. So I wanted to break it up in different videos to get you guys to understand. First, by understanding the history of planetary alignment, planetary and lunar and solar activity as it corresponds to our history on this planet and world events. So as I showed you in that first video about how throughout the years we can see how planetary alignment and things that happen with planetary conjunctions and so on and so forth has been influencing things on our planet. And we can see that when these things take place, in space, things happen on our planet. And this is how they have been using this energy that exists to make things happen or to have their way as far as the control aspect of what's taking place. Now, we got to also look at the fact that, these energies can basically be drawn out and used for different purposes, but they have to stay within the certain aspect of energy that these planetary alignments and these solar and lunar alignments and these astrological constellations and so on and so forth, the houses and the deacons and so on. Everything has different energies, different powers, and they have to be within the confines of that time, that space, that zodiacal energy, which makes sense when you get into it, when you understand what it's talking about. So they've been using this over the centuries to shape the way our future is going. And this is how they have been able to write in the Bible exactly what's going to happen and make it seem as if it's prophecy. And this is how they know what they're going to do. The agenda has been set centuries ago, millennia ago, and they're following a plan. And we're deeply involved in that plan. And we have to really look at how it's been affecting us and where this whole thing is headed. So that's the first video. And then the last video I talked about the frequency and sound and the planetary effects on our spiritual selves, our bodies, our course of life, and how we're going to move and what's going to happen, the effects on the planet, agriculture, so on and so forth, what the ancients looked at to see how the day was going to go or how things was going to go. And I gave you guys the application of that, like the possibility, because of course, a lot of you guys were saying, how is it possible? It doesn't make sense, just because this planet's out there, we don't even know if this planet's out there. How is it that they're going to have some kind of influence on us on this planet? And I gave you guys frequency and sound. And in fact, you have the harmony of the spheres and how everything is music, everything is sound, everything is vibration. And we have to be in tune with that. And how we have become out of tune with that because of the powers that be and things that's happening on this planet, and how the animals and nature have stayed in tune with it, how they can do the things that they do because they are in tune, and how the ancient Egyptians were able to do what they did because they were in tune. And once the powers that be took over, they took us out of sync with the planetary harmonies and with the frequency and the sound, and they gave us a new sound. And that sound has been driving, the planet when you really think about it, because we all live in a hip hop culture. No matter where you go, it's understood, but it need only be understood by the people that have the power to control the frequency and the energy and receive it and shape this reality that we know, and that is us. Which is why, as I said, everything that's happening has to do with us. Plain and simple, there's no way around it. So we got to look at all that, and it's a even deeper aspect to all that we're going to get into in this video to get you guys to understand even more, how deep this is and why we are where we are as a people and why they need to keep us here. Because again, I always talk about to keep their foot on our neck. We don't get a moment to breathe. When we think it's going to go right, it goes wrong, and we have to pay attention to why. Now, the ancient Egyptians and the ancients didn't just believe that the planets had a symbolic effect on us, but a very real effect on our physical bodies. In fact, they believe that the planets and the constellations control parts of our bodies, and we have body parts that correspond with different planets and different constellations. So this is what they understood, and this is what everybody understood, as we'll get into it, that it wasn't just this frequency and sound, vibration, and so on, that frequency and sound and vibration we could actually pick up. Our bodies are transmitters, receivers. We can pick up this sound and it will affect our physical bodies. So again, we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, meaning we are just a small universe in ourselves, a part of a whole big universe, and we are all working together. We just lost the understanding of, how to work and how to be in sync with our, our duties. So it says here, the 9 planets, their roles and their effects on human body. The human body is one tiny universe which exhibits or represents all the 9 planets, including the 12 zodiac signs. Each and every planet and the sign is related directly to various parts of our body, responsible for the adequate functioning. The position of the planets and the signs is represented by a birth chart that not only displays events and possibilities of life, but also the state of a person's body and mind. And your birth chart would basically just be, a picture of, when you came into the world, the alignment of the planets then, like a snapshot of how things looked at that time, how the universe was and what was in that alignment at that exact time. So when you do a birth chart, for the most part, they want your, birth date, where you was born, and the time is very important as well. So they can get this birth chart and see what energies or what was in your alignment for what's going to be your personality, possibly. Because I'm one of the people that'll tell you, I'm an Aquarius, and I exhibit traits that's unlike an Aquarius, and I have many different traits from many different signs, and it's one of the things that you'll hear about when getting into astrology. Some believe that we'll go into every single sign before we move on. We'll be Aquarius, we'll be Pisces, we'll be Cancer, so on and so forth. We'll be every sign eventually. We'll go through different stages, and this is how we are not just set in one set of feelings or emotions. So you'll look at the traits of an Aquarius and you'll look at the traits of a Cancer, and we can't specifically say, okay, you're an Aquarius by the way that you act. Some people you can, but some people you can't. So we can't just, be able to get all the Aquarius and tell that they're all Aquarius based upon the actions that, goes under Aquarius, and the same thing with Gemini, same thing with Libra, Leo. We can't do that because everybody has consciousness and everybody can feel the energy of all the other signs, because it's supposed to be one cohesive thing, and we're not supposed to be stuck in one sign. And maybe at one point it was that, but we're talking about so many different incarnations now because we fell so low. Who knows? But many believe that we went through every single sign, and we are the 9. And I talked about this before, and it's one of the things I want to get into in this video about what that means for us being the 9. And it means that we have the highest potential of leaving here, and some yogis will tell you that all we got to do is live to 85. You could be the dumbest, stupidest person on the planet. If you make it to 85, then you'll go. And some will tell you that we have the possibility of escaping because we have been through at this 9 where we are at now. The reason why everything has happened and we're coming into the age of Aquarius and what that means, we have the highest possibility of moving forward, and we might not need very much a spiritual awakening to do so, but we're going to need some. And there's a lot of different implications to us being the 9. And as you can see, as I showed you guys in the video, how everybody else after 1997 or 1999, 2000 and up, they're in steps. It's like 5, 6, 7, 8 when you start to do the count, as I showed you guys. But we are all 9s. If you were born 1800s up until 1999, you're a 9. No matter how you slice it, you multiply, you're going to get 9. We're 9s for a very important reason. So again, we got to look at the fact that they seen that the planets have a very real effect on our physical body, and that if you followed and did what you were supposed to do with the corresponding planets and the lunar activity, solar activity, that you could somehow understand, your body. You can understand the way your direction your life was going to go. You have real power, and understanding of your body, because the different planets and the different signs correspond with different body parts. So we got 9 planets, and we know the ancient Egyptians had the 9 parts of the soul. We got 9 parts of our abdomen, 9 parts of our digestive system, 9 parts of our respiratory system. There's so many different 9s that's in us. So we have this, and we have these corresponding planets at different parts of the body, and it's telling us here. And we got to remember, we got to add in also the sun and the moon, because they also have different parts of us that they control. So it says here, sun deals with the heart, spine, and general vitality. And you're going to have different things from depending on where you go. That's going to say different stuff. But we know the sun, of course, is our energy, and the moon, stomach, digestive system, female organs, lymphatic system. Mercury's the brain, central nervous system, which, mercury, the element. If you get mercury poisoning, that's what it will affect your nervous system, your brain. Venus, throat, kidneys, thalamus glands. Mars, muscles, head, adrenal glands. There's so many different things, Jupiter, liver, Saturn, so on and so forth. But there are other things that these planets correspond with when you go back and start looking at, the information they give you about the planets corresponding to different body parts and different parts of the body. So this is a very ancient understanding that sounds crazy now, but this was so relevant back then, and this was used. It was like common knowledge back then. So, we look at it today, it sounds a little bit weird. A lot of this information may be new to many of you, but as I said, this is something that they knew about. This is something that was practiced for a long time. It was always the understanding that the planets also rule different parts of the body. And that if you was a doctor, you had to know astrology. If you understood the bodies, you had to understand the heavenly bodies and, the earthly bodies. And it's a reason why we have, biology, and then we have astrology. We have all of these ologies that deal with either, the planets and, solar system, the study of the earthly bodies and the heavenly bodies. So it's one of the reasons why Hippocrates said, a physician without a knowledge of astrology has no right to call himself a physician. Now, when you look at these are from medieval times, the medical dictionaries. And it was a clear understanding as, early as the medieval times, matter of fact, as early as the 1600s, that there was this clear connection between the planets and our bodies. And you look at these from these English books of the bodies and the corresponding planets to different parts of the body. So they had this understanding of planetary activity, astrology, astrological signs, the zodiac, constellations, and our bodies, working together, and that these constellations have effects on our bodies. And at certain times, you could understand different parts of the bodies. And this was something that was just known. It was always known up until religion came to hide it. And before religion, this is what people used, as you can see here. This is something that is in so many different books, and it's just was something that was well known, and it wasn't like spooky as people look at it today and think, how could they even think something like that? Because we look back and we think they ain't know nothing in the past. They knew everything. They knew what they was doing. They understood this information, and obviously to use it for so long. When we go back and look at the ancient civilizations, we see the same thing. We see zodiacs. We see them having a knowledge of planetary, lunar, solar activity corresponding to the body. We find zodiacs, we find this information. And one of the most well-known places we find the zodiac, one of the most famous zodiacs, of course, would be the Chinese zodiac. And it's talking about here, human internal organs connected to solar system planets. In the system of Chinese medicine, which has ancient origins stretching back thousands of years, each of the internal organs of the human body has connections to either yin or yang to specific periods during the daily rotation of the Earth, to the energy typical of one of the 5 elements, which would be wood, fire, water, metal, and earth, to different emotional states. And interestingly enough, to one of the different planets in our solar system. Much more could be written about these elemental correspondences and the fact that the organs which power our bodies and sustain life in each one of us have characteristics which correspond to these 5 elemental energies. But it seems that one of the most intriguing and significant aspects of this ancient wisdom is the connection of our vital organs with a corresponding planet in the celestial realm as well. How can it be that the organs in our body have connections to the mighty orbs which whirl silently through space, the closest of which, Venus, is around 25 million miles away, and the furthest of which, Saturn, averages around 890 million miles away and sometimes reaches distances of over 1 billion miles from us? The materialist philosophy currently in vogue admits of no possible connection between the aspect of the planets and the functioning of the vital organs inside the bodies of billions of people on our planet, and dismiss much of the teachings of Chinese medicine as well. However, such wisdom does not survive for thousands of years in constant practical application among the people without some level of validity, of course. Further, there is evidence that the ancients around the world, including in the West, once acknowledged the connection between the celestial heavenly objects and the vital organs of the human body. For example, the previous post touches on the fact that the ancients believed that each of the zodiacal signs was most closely associated with different parts of the human body. It was taught that Libra, for instance, rules the kidneys and Gemini the lungs. This concept is clearly related to the teaching of the microcosm, which is the teaching that each individual is a reflection of the cosmos, that each person is in fact a microcosm simultaneously containing an entire cosmos within the individual, while at the same time reflecting and responding to the motions of the macrocosm, the earth, the sun, the moon, the planets, and the whole universe. This concept has been largely forgotten in the West, but it has survived in other parts of the world. The understanding of the connections between the planets and our vital organs is one manifestation of that ancient wisdom. Now, if you try to explain this stuff today, people gonna call you crazy. If you try to explain to people that our organs and everything corresponds with different planetary energies and so on and so forth, it sounds crazy. Institutions are gonna call you crazy, and they're probably gonna put you in the institution. But we can clearly see that we can go back to medieval times. We can go back to England. We can go back and look around the world and see that this is what was practiced for thousands of years. This is what everybody knew, and it was something that was just known and used in practice. So this is one of the reasons why you have J.P. Morgan quoted as saying anybody can be a millionaire, but to become a billionaire you need an astrologer. They understood this. This is something that was used until religion came and covered it up, plain and simple. So you have to understand, King James sort of set the stage for this because they understood what was coming. These people had this secret society long before the Bible was even formed, as far as the King James Version. But he gave us demonology. Remember, 1599, King James of Scotland then gave us demonology. And in that book, basically talked about witchcraft and demons and what's basically going to happen to people in this new religious era that we get ready to come into. Then everybody was getting ready for the new religious era. Everybody was in this time of science and understanding and learning, and everything was going right. And they were preparing for what they thought wouldn't come, just like today we're preparing for this whole new world order. They was preparing for the whole religious new world to come. So they sitting back looking at the science and looking at how stuff makes sense and making these connections with planetary and lunar activity and getting it and understanding that, okay, we have this knowledge, why aren't we applying it? What's going on? I mean, they were so intelligent when you start to go back and look at this information, they understood. But it's like, why are we not applying this stuff? Why is it not equating into anything? What's going on? All the while we are being enslaved, and they're trying to figure this stuff out, thinking that they have some kind of power. But King James put out demonology and talked about fairies and, They basically start condemning everything that was normal. So they start condemning, alchemy, and condemning sciences, and condemning astrology, and everything was, Satan, demon, devil worship, so on and so forth. So this is, 1599, 1604 began, the creation of the King James Bible. And of course, everything started to change around this time. So as I always tell you guys, they hid the information in plain sight. Best place to hide something is in plain sight. So King James gives us the King James Version. They hide the Masonic square and compass right there on the dedication page. Francis Bacon was a master coder and considered one of the fathers of Freemasonry. And they code all this stuff that they now outlawing with alchemy and understanding astrology. They code it all into the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. And it's sitting on the altar of Freemasonry, and they basically going around and slaughtering anybody who would, even talk about this stuff. But they hid this information in there, and they didn't want us to know. I mean, when you look in the Bible, what do we see? The Bible's talking about Orion. It's talking about the Pleiades. It's talking about Leo. It's talking about different constellations. Mazzaroth, that's like translated as being constellations or the Zodiac. So they're talking about so many different things that deals with astrology. And we understand all this information, and we can put the stuff together, as I talked about, with the whole Old Testament corresponding with Greek mythology. And we know Greek mythology was dealing with the Pantheon, and the Pantheon was dealing with the planets. And the planets was talking about, these powers. And all this stuff is right there in the Bible. It's Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, but really going back to the planets, and then it's right in the Bible, giving us these deities, but also talking about astrology itself. We read about Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, the bear constellations, and it's talking about these constellations. And you would think, okay, they're giving us information about the constellations, but then it's condemning astrology. It's telling you not to deal with this stuff, not to be trying to figure this stuff out. Just trust in the Lord, trust in the Bible. Remember Isaiah 47:13-14. It says, "Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. There shall not be a coal to warm at, nor a fire to sit before it." We know it's talked about Jesus, the sun on the Zodiac. Plain and simple. Jesus represents your conscious self. God represents your subconscious. Plain and simple. So your consciousness is basically getting orders from your subconscious, but they're basically the same, which gives you the whole God is, basically Jesus, coming down to experience life, or so on and so forth. That's why it don't make sense, because it's giving you. So Jesus would be your conscious state that is separate from your physical state, let's just say. You know what I'm saying? So it's the you right now watching this, and then you have your consciousness, which kind of sort of is a separate you, and it's like still part of you, and it's like you can go in and out from you physical, and then the conscious part of you, which is a little bit more aware. And then you have your subconscious, which projects the dream world, and it's basically like the all-powerful God, right? So Jesus would be your consciousness. And of course, that's the sun, just like God is still the sun. And then you had the disciples. And of course, the disciples would represent the 12 signs of the Zodiac, 12 disciples, 12 signs of the Zodiac, which represents all of us as well. So we are not only God and Jesus and Satan, we are also the 12 disciples, the 12 signs of the Zodiac, which represents all of us, everybody. So you have Jesus constantly talking to his disciples, which is like your consciousness talking to you, which is like, the universal consciousness talking to everybody and saying to you, follow me. You can't get to the Father. You can't get to the subconscious but through me. Plain and simple. You need to get and be one with me, follow me, and then you can get to the subconscious. Then we all gonna become one. Jesus talking about I am in you, he in me, and so on and so forth, and all the stuff I've been reading to you guys about Jesus saying I'm in you, and the Father is in me, and I'm in the Father, and so on and so forth. It's all you. plain and simple. So you got to get this connection when it's talking about Jesus. So Jesus being the sun, 12 disciples being the Zodiac, the 12 signs of the Zodiac. So we're talking about the Zodiac. And again, you have New Testament, Jesus, Son, Zodiac, plain and simple. And then we go back. Remember, Old Testament showed you guys they was able to do what they was doing by following the Zodiac, plain and simple. They couldn't win the battles with the Ark of the Covenant unless they was, fighting with the Ark of the Covenant and it was following that astrological sign. That's what it's trying to show you and represent, that they have the Ark of the Covenant, meaning that they are basically following the correct astrological sign, following the Zodiac. So you have in the Old Testament, what? Follow the Zodiac. Follow astrology. What it's saying, all that shit, that's all it's telling you. Follow astrology to understand who you are. And then in the New Testament, we think it's flipping over. We think it's something completely different, but it's telling you the exact same thing. Jesus, the 12 disciples, same shit. Zodiac. You. Follow it. Your birth chart. Understand what picture or what the universe was like around that time to help understand who you are. It's not super important. Meditation will help you with that, but we'll get into all that eventually. But that's what it's giving you. Understand this stuff. Learn this stuff. This is something I didn't think I would be getting into yet, because I had a lot more stuff I wanted to talk about before we start getting into all of this, because it's a lot to learn. But as we're looking at events and things that's happening now, that's really showing us, one, we knew the age of Aquarius was coming, but what's happening now before we even get into Aquarius is something I didn't think would happen yet. But after Aquarius came. But we got to look at history, as I always do, and you got to understand this. About put all this information out in previous videos, so you guys can understand why history is important, because this is going to help you understand what this stuff is all about. So you had them bring in religion to cover up the old ways of astrology and what was real knowledge, to cover all that up and outlaw it. And this is the reason for the Inquisitions, the Spanish Inquisitions and the Roman Inquisitions, and them just murdering between, I think the numbers is 300,000 to the millions of people was killed to usher in Christianity, because they amassed a huge army. And you got to understand, this is stuff that they hide, but they don't. You just got to find it in books. We're talking about the papacy, and we're talking about the Knights Templar, who was basically going out. They was like the elite assassins going out killing those with knowledge. But then you also had these armies, these soldiers of God, the soldiers for the papacy and for these royal families, to basically go out and murder anybody and kill everybody who was in opposition to what they was trying to do. And that is what was needed for them to set up what they set up as far as this whole religious deception. That is what took place. And we got to hope that it's not going to be another large mass murdering of people to bring in what they're trying to bring in. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, so we can understand. But when we go back and start to calculate the numbers, we're going to find out, one, how subtle it is. But yeah, they really basically did kill millions and millions of people to usher in what they're bringing in. So you had the Inquisitions. You had them covering up all information, and you had a lot of people being executed because of what they do. You had people like Giordano Bruno and Lucilio Vanini. These two guys were basically Roman philosophers, astrologers, mathematicians, so on and so forth, that died, burned at the stake during the Inquisition for basically talking about what we're talking about now. They understood planetary activity. They was basically going with what was already known back then, but teaching it and putting it out, which is what they didn't want. So they was murdered, burnt alive. A lot of other people was burnt alive and killed, and they basically forced people to shut up and fall in line. That's what happened. They was held hostage, and eventually those generations passed, and the younger generations was being taught, and as they grew up, that knowledge went away, because the younger generations grew up with the knowledge that they wanted them to grow up with, and then it just stuck. And that's what happens with generational indoctrination, which is what happened to us with religion. So the old ways was gone, and the people who had the knowledge didn't dare talk about it. They didn't pass it down because they didn't want it to mean death for a family member. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people was being killed and murdered back then. And you had the witch trial the witch's hammer, the Mondaeus Maleficarum, I think it's called. You had so much going on, and they wrote about this stuff. So many different people being killed, and so many different crusades and stuff that's happening, with them just basically wiping out all traces of the old information. Because it wasn't just about them keeping that information from the people; they was keeping it from us. Plain and simple. Because you still have free black people out there. And they didn't want none of this information to get into the hands of us, and us, trigger something.